Welcome to Podcast Coaching with Christine, a resource for growth, motivation, and community for podcasters. I'm your host, Christine O'Donnell. I'm an Emmy-nominated TV journalist and podcast coach. And while podcasting is something many can do, keeping at it, overcoming imposter syndrome, and embracing our vulnerabilities as strengths doesn't come easy. That is why we need a little bit of coaching from time to time. Each week, I interview someone who has an exceptional story and talent that will help independent podcasters grow their shows. Let's get to it. I've got a great guest for you guys today because I know there's a lot of podcasters out there who are thinking, gosh, what if I could turn my podcast into a book? What if my podcast could be a product? How does that even work? Do I have to self-publish? Do I have to hunt down the people at HarperCollins and be like, hello, do you know me? Hi, I'm here. And see if they pick you up? What does that process look like? Well, our guest today, her name is Angela Engel, and she is a book publisher and the founder of The Collective Book Studio. She has 20 years in sales and marketing. She is an expert at publishing, and she's here to give us the goods today. Angela, welcome to the show.
I'm so excited to be here. I just love this energy, and even the way that you phrased the fact that podcasters are thinking about writing a book, because that's true. We are getting approached by podcasters on how to turn their podcast into books. So I love this concept and this entire discussion. I can't wait to dive in.
Podcasting has blown up in the past year. I swear it has doubled the amount of people who are podcasting. But hey, good news, the amount of people of listening also doubled. And this is based on the latest research done by Edison Research and Triton Digital in their yearly study called The Infinite Dial. So good news out there for people who are interested in podcasting, starting a podcast, or if you currently are a podcaster. So if there's a podcaster out there, Angela, who's like, gosh, I want to write a book. This podcast is my ticket to writing a book. What should they do? What should they be thinking?
I think the first thing we always ask is, what's their why? What's their purpose in writing that book? Okay. Is it to attract a certain level of guest? Is it to attract, or is it for them as an expert in the space? I think that is their first question. What is the purpose of that book? So if that, and who is going to buy it, and who is the audience? And actually, often those are two completely different people. So they need to kind of, I would say, get out their pen and paper and write those things that I'm just saying. Literally just get a free for all. And really, I always say, write your purpose. And once your purpose is written, then you're going to have a lot more clarity around what would a table of contents look like? What would a synopsis look like? And then do the research. Also, what else is out there in that space, in that category? And not because you need to copy it, but because that will really also clarify how you differentiate yourself in the space.
So I love that you shared that, because that is actually what I work with people every time they go to launch a podcast. I have a form. I call it my little worksheet that I have people fill out, and it's why are you doing this? What, is podcasting really for you? Is this the thing you should do? Why do you want to do it? What is your purpose? What is your mission statement? Who are you talking to?
Yes.
Because all of those things tie into what would become a successful podcast, is really honing in on those things. So it's so, I guess maybe reaffirming for me to hear you say.
Yes. Exactly. It's the why. I don't do, my categories are not memoir or fiction. They're not the latest novel. My category and my specialty is really lifestyle, which encompasses children's books, but it also and food and wine and all things like that in your life, your Marie Kondo organizing tips. but it also encompasses career development and self-help and parenting. That is lifestyle. And podcasting, lifestyle podcasts have blown up. Look, I'm listening to them. I'm a mom of 3. I want to go on a little walk and zone out for a half an hour or 45 minutes tops and listen to some of these things. And so just like you said, podcast is booming. Actually, physical book sales were up in 2020 by over 6.2%. I believe. I don't have the exact statistic. You didn't tell me I had to bring my statistics, but I love statistics and I love data. And we're seeing that. We're seeing people buy physical books because there's something really wonderful about the written word.
Important, I think, when we live in this world of Zoom and cell phones and phone calls and the internet, to sitting down and giving yourself some quiet time with a book, something you can hold in your hands and disconnect from everything else around you. So I love to hear that. I would hope that. I've actually been reading more books during quarantine times. So, I mean,
Yeah.
that's great.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, it's why I founded the Collective Book Studio. The idea of holding a book in your hand, the idea of this object, this idea that the book is actually an art form, from typography to editorial to production and design. Everything we put into it. I founded the Collective Book Studio because I come from publishing, right? I come from companies such as 10 Speed Press and Chronicle Books. I was at Cameron and Company, which is part of Abrams. And these companies we have been trained to make books really beautiful objects in so many ways, right? And so I founded the Collective Book Studio because I really saw a need in the market to help people create a physicality to their words that print on demand. And a lot of these companies, they can't do. It's impossible to do. Because in the creative development, you have to work with people. You can't just work with an interface.
So, Angela, I would love to dive into that because I do think if someone in the back of their mind is like, gosh, I've been wanting to write this book. I've been working on it. I've got it in my Google Docs. It's been there for years. What do I do? What is my next step? Like, do I need to get recognized by like a big dog in the industry? And how does that work? Or should I just self-publish, but will people read my book if I self-publish? Or is there a next best thing?
Oh, I love you, Christine. I think there's a next best thing, but I think again, it comes down to why and purpose. Okay. So I love my colleagues in many of my traditional houses, and literary agents serve a purpose. Publishing serves a purpose. Traditional publishing serves a real need and purpose. First of all, if you think about publishing, we are media. We are traditional media that holds something. For example, when a manuscript comes in, it is our duty not to print hate speech, racism, right? It is our duty as the industry, when people have blinders on and are using words that are completely inappropriate for children. Or even look at Dr. Seuss Enterprises and what Random House Inc. decided to do with 6 books that they recently shelved because of images that are no longer relevant no longer relevant and absolutely should not be on every librarian's shelf anymore. Like, those images of people have impressions on young people. And I'm proud of our industry to really talk about this. How are we moving forward? How are we saying this problem with self-publishing is that there is no guard. And we have to be careful of that. And that's why I have launched the Collective Book Studio to say, whoa, we are still needing people in the industry that has a certain responsibility in terms of what we're curating, what we're allowing on our bookshelves for everybody, our children and our adults, our mothers, our families.
That's so topical.
Thank you.
Uh, it really, I mean, it's so topical. I feel like there has been outrage, because people are, because some Dr. Seuss books have been shelved, right? And I think you make a really good point that, while maybe 100 something years ago, these things may have been happening, they weren't okay. And it's still not okay. And it's really wonderful that we're living in a world where there are people now who are like, let's check ourselves and really be as fair and objective and be putting content out there for our children to grow and be the best like future representatives of this world. So yeah, I mean, super topical, um very important. And you bring up a good point, with self-publish. Side note, I have worked with some really big dogs in the publishing industry and in the self-publishing space. And I'm not going to give anything away, but I work as a media coach also, like, for executive training. And while I was doing this for this big company, there was this huge response one day because someone who had allegedly murdered another person was just taken into custody, and they had found out that he had self-published a book about what he wanted to do. So about this
Wow.
specific crime, and it became like a huge internal moment. Um, and they took it down, and everything was taken down and taken off of the site as fast as possible. Um, but it was like a real, like, you make such
Yeah,
a good
like
point.
now you see what I'm saying.
Mhm.
And I
Yeah.
can tell you, you know, I'm publishing an incredible book by a podcaster.
Yeah.
They're the founders of Dear White Women podcast. It was 3 years ago, I think around when they founded this podcast. And I'm good friends with me, Sasha. And she calls me around right after George Floyd was murdered. And she was like, we have to figure out. I have so much amazing content, Angela. I've been doing this work for almost like close to at that time over 2 years, right? So they've worked so hard with our development. They wanted to get it right because it's a topic that we have to get right, right? When we talk, and the book really truly addresses white women and how are we becoming allies? How are we like standing up? How are we doing the work? And they're able to kind of come from that space, these two women, and they're really experts. But we are developing a podcast into a book actually right now. But they were new, but they couldn't do that alone, right? They couldn't
Mhm.
because of the topic, because of how sensitive, because what and I'm not trying this podcast to say, hey, don't do self-publishing, because I know it serves some and definitely for entrepreneurs. But let's talk about why. A lot of people feel they want to own their IP, right? And I get that. So that's why I've decided to disrupt the industry. We are very different. You own the IP, you pay us a creative fee because you're going to own the content. And I say, if you're working with great graphic designers, great editors, great illustrators, even if you're on the self-published train, you got to invest in your book. It's a product. I think you probably coach that to podcasters on equipment. It's the same thing, you guys. It's the same thing. You invest thousands and thousands of dollars in a branding agency, but you don't want to invest that in your book. My thing is, absolutely, you need to think of your book. It is written. It is there. It is final. It's a product of you. Just like when you take that much time to develop any type of product you see on the shelf. I just want people to kind of slow down and go, oh, you're right. It shouldn't just be fast content. We have enough of that with Twitter.
Yes. Yeah. So I'm curious because we've had some people on the show in the past who've written their own books, and like they've invested in like working with a talent writer, what's the
Oh,
word?
editor.
Thank you.
Yes, an editor.
And so I'm pulling up right now a friend of mine who was actually on the show. Her name is Courtney Friel, and she wrote the book Tonight at 10, Kicking Booze and Breaking News. And she said she invested so much money in getting her book published that she got hers. Launchpad Publishing is her publisher. I don't know if you're familiar with them, but she said she spent more money getting the book published than she ever made back.
Yeah, so you need to I would be the advice there is look who the publisher is and do they have distribution? Because distribution cannot just mean Amazon. So this goes back to the idea of the physical gorgeousness of a book, right? This you have to remember, I come from book publishing I started in 2000, 21 years ago, where Amazon was literally Jeff Bezos in a garage as a bookseller and competing with Walden Pond that was like in the mall. Okay, I'm going to date myself, but that is how old I am. And I remember when like Four Agreements, this amazing book from Amber Allen in San Rafael Publishing became a New York Times bestseller, right? And because Oprah loved it. And it was like the biggest champion ever. And I was on the marketing team, right? But that book had beautiful deep flaps, was the right trim size. The paper, I can probably still smell the paper. It was just so well done, right? The book was so well done. And Amber Allen, a small, tiny little independent press, had a powerhouse behind them. I worked with Publishers Group West, which is now part of Ingram, but had full distribution. So that press and the Four Agreements could make a New York Times bestseller. So what I would say to your friend who was on the podcast is, or anybody that's looking at a company, you have to grill them about their distribution. And if they say, I've got Amazon, Target, and Barnes and Noble, and bam, is that online only? Or do they have a physical warehouse outside of Ingram Spark? Do they have a physical warehouse? Do they have full distribution to get you into the stores of Barnes and Noble, to get you into the Strand or Powell's or Tattered Cover? I mean, you name it, City Lights Bookstore. That is what they need to ask. Because if she does not have that distribution, you are not diversifying the marketplace. And how are you going to be able to be then on some of the more traditional outlets, the newspapers, the radio, the more traditional media, if you're not actually available in store?
It's so interesting because she has an amazing book. It's an amazing story. And I'm a fan of her because
I would love to meet her. I'm happy to give any advice. That's like, no, seriously. I think we met on Clubhouse. Is that how we met?
We met on Clubhouse. Shout out to Clubhouse.
Like, okay. So if you made me on Clubhouse, I am curating rooms that are very about survey, about really having your friend come to me and go, okay, this is what I did, and say, okay, this is who you're going to research. These are the questions you're going to ask. Look, my model doesn't work for everybody. It's not a crystal ball. It's still an investment. It's like I try to make it also to get with us isn't competitive, because I have to actually feel that we can sell 4,000 books physically through the door, because to launch into the trade is it's an expensive endeavor. And so that risk that I evaluate is going to be less risk than imagine a big house, right? So obviously 4,000 is to break even. I want to sell a lot more than that. But a big house, they're evaluating you. Are we going to, set 10, 15, 20, 30,000 copies? And that's why I just wrote, or I didn't write it, Elizabeth James, who's incredible, one of our developmental editors, just wrote it on our blog, The Power of the Small Press. And I would definitely encourage people to look at small presses, because small presses might not give those fancy big advances, but they can together, they can often, if they have the right marketing team or the right look, they can do really great things.
So Angela,
I'm passionate about this topic, as you
I
can tell.
love it. What would someone have to like, what would it take for someone, say a podcaster out there who's like, I want to turn my podcast into a book, or I'm ready to take that next step? What would that look like? Like, how would they approach you? How much would they have to invest? I'm sure it like varies dependingly, but can you share any of those details?
Sure. I mean, look, it making a book could cost creatively, on average, anywhere between $12 to $15,000, right? For just like a straight, like, hey, depending on the manuscript, black and white, like really great. We're gonna go after designer, editorial, whatever. All the way to $80,000. If I'm doing, to be honest, if you're doing a cookbook, those are really expensive. Between the photography and the developmental editing, the recipe testing we do, cookbooks can be very expensive. So do we have ways to cut corners because we're so talented, I have to say. I mean, I've got Amy Treadwell. She was 18 years in food and wine at Chronicle Books. Like, we have ways to basically make it probably what would look like an 80,000 book down to 40. But it depends on, because we are so driven by the author's vision, I always say it's up to them. Like, we can present you with a couple ideas, but essentially, unlike, because we don't own the IP, they don't own it and say we're done and I don't get to be part of it. They're really part of that development with us. I think that's what is really exciting and why we have the clients we have.
Okay, interesting. I love this because I feel like people are so protective of their IP right now. And is that what people lose when they work with a big publisher?
Yes, okay. They acquire it and then you have to buy back the rights. Correct. That is a tradition. They give you an advance, which is on your royalties. So meaning, if your book doesn't sell, there's no money after that check, or it can take up to 4 to 5 years later to get any money back. So that money, whatever they advise you. And my attitude is sometimes look for agents who are really good at, maybe you're not going to get the $100,000 book deal, but you're going to get a good $20,000 advance and some marketing support. Often that's actually a better deal, because don't forget, this is on your royalties. So if your book starts working and you get some marketing support, you're going to get money there. So I often say to people, don't underestimate some of the more mid-level agents. Like, sometimes what I think, it's like, oh, I keep getting passed off of these big agencies. They're looking for these huge wins, right? And you might be surprised, because there's always something. There's always some great agent and great house that can really, like, I think of Chicago Review Press. It's a great house in Chicago that has had bestsellers, but they might not give you the $150,000 advance, but they're going to give you other support that might be better for you.
Okay, so let's take me, for example. My
Yes.
podcast, it's amazing. It's called Podcast Coaching with Christine, and we help people launch and grow their podcasts and stay motivated during the process, because podcasting can take a lot of time, a lot of effort, and sometimes you feel like you're putting so much into it, but you're not getting stuff back. So that's one of the points of this podcast, is to really share with people ways to get back from their podcast and feel like they really are touching people with their stories. So, not physically podcasting. Anyway, so say I've got, 40 episodes. They're all about an hour. So that's like maybe that. How many chapters in a book? 40 episodes for, so
well, you wouldn't want 40 chapters. Like,
no,
okay,
no.
so
You want like 10 chapters, right? So like
Yeah.
I pick my 10 best episodes or my 10 best takeaways, and I'm like, this is the stuff that people need. And I'm talking specifically women between the ages of 18 and 40 who are like, I want to podcast. I don't know how. I want to do it the right way. I come to you and then you're like, Christine, you need to go back and do this.
Pretty much. Yes, you're right.
So
You're right. First of all, you're going to do themes.
okay.
You're going to do themes because you're going to pull in the different things from different episodes. Okay. You're not going to say, okay, one show gets a whole chapter. Oh my God, it would be like one paragraph. Some of them. I mean, come on.
You're right.
I mean, come on. So, and then it's like, and that's the magic of developmental editing, right? So you're going to have an idea, but you're going to be open to, okay. So this is, okay, we're going to go themed. We're going to do this way. I've got all of this content. And they're going to like, oh, well, how about this? And you're going to branch out here. And maybe this whole book, if you think about a podcast or how you even are engaging in me, you're teaching me how to be a better speaker, right? So in so many ways, your book is not just for the podcaster. It's for the person who wants to go on, be on TEDx, is the person who has to just honestly be in front of their big corporation, right? We have to also address mothers and women who are maybe top at Adobe. Let's just take that company.
Mm-hmm.
And they need to go give a huge presentation. Like there's often things within a podcast. How do you become comfortable in dialogue? How do you become comfortable? Like I didn't even realize, to be honest, that I'm going to be physically being looked at today.
I told you.
I know. I just forgot. It's mom brain. I do have 3 kids, and it's quarantine. But what I'm saying is, you just got to roll with it, right? Yeah, exactly. You just got to roll with it. I was like, for the guests on this, I was like, oh no, and put on you always have at your desk, by the way, I always have 100%. I have like 3 different kinds. So, so that is the biggest thing, is that you just really have to also, I want everyone to hear this. It is okay to slow down. The thing about it is that, and maybe, I don't know, I'd love to know how you say that to podcasters, but I say this to people all the time. Self-publishing, when you're like, I have this big talk, I need it out in 3 months. Your talk still exists. You can still talk about your book. You can still get pre-orders, but take the time, because the written word is different. So that's what's my advice there.
Slow down. So with podcasters, this is my thoughts to them when they're like, I wanted to podcast like yesterday, and I feel like I'm missing out on the moment, and
Totally.
and if I don't start podcasting right now, then like I'm gonna lose out on all this stuff. And I want to remind all podcasters, and if you are someone right now who is listening to this and you're like, oh my gosh, she's talking about me, I am. And what I want you to know is that we're not missing the moment. It just feels that way because the FOMO is so real. And I felt it, and I do feel it sometimes, especially when I look at what other people are doing. And then I have to check myself and remind myself that I can't control anyone else. I can only control me. I can only control the things that I think about for myself. And if I truly want to impact people, I need to step back and think, why am I doing this? And how do I move forward to actually purposefully speak to my audience so that they actually do connect with what I'm saying? So you still have time. There are still 43% of Americans who haven't even listened to a podcast yet. There is a lot of room for growth in this industry. So if you feel like you're missing the moment, you're not. We're still very early in the podcasting age. It just feels different because now other people are starting to get into it, and there's more press, and the press never stops. Like, we're so hooked to our phones right now that we feel like we're bombarded, but no. There is still room to grow. Don't worry. Step back. Make a plan, make an outline, give yourself 3 months to produce your show before you put it out there. That's what most people do. So don't worry about it.
I love that. And because that's exactly, Christine, what I say about a book, right? Like I have so many people coming to me and go, but Angela, I really want, and I go, what's your why? Right. And I'm actually working with this incredible woman right now. We're doing a book with her called, basically, it's quiet selling. and she has a business that she was really big at LinkedIn and Salesforce and all of these things. And then she went out on her own like an entrepreneur, and she's created this really incredible coaching business on basically coaching like chiropractors and dentists and things like that, introverts essentially, or like why or never thought of being a salesperson, and coaching them kind of this concept of quiet selling. And she's been teaching and coaching for so long, and she helps people also to get passive income through like their LinkedIn course. So we're doing her book. And at first she's like, can we get it out so fast, like for October or whatever, I might have conferences. And then, this last couple months, she's like, I want more time. And we're like, of course, like, let's make this the best book, because the idea, a good idea, quiet selling, that's an evergreen. That's what publishers are looking for. They're not looking for your blog post. I have tons of great blog posts, like we all do, right? Like, I mean, they're not. They're looking for that evergreen. And I said, and that takes time. And so now her book, I think we're still aiming for around February to come out in 2022. And it's much faster, by the way, than traditional publishing, where it could take 3 years with an agent and then all this other stuff to get a list. So we are much faster to publish, but we still believe in that kind of idea. If we're going to find a great book, it's going to be able to stand on its own. Like, it's not going to need to be published that exact moment.
Yeah. So how does it work? Does someone, do people pay you a retainer, or like, how does that work? Or is there like just like an upfront? Like, how does
there's an upfront. So, okay. And I'm laughing and giggling because I don't always get it right. Like, for example, I might literally, people have zero idea how much great editors cost, and they deserve every penny, because literally they are like whisperers. They are like book coaches, developmental coaches. They are like the author when they're like, oh my God. They're like, okay. And they just listen and have this ability to hear, and then go, okay, so this is what we can do. This is what we can't do, right? I am from sales and marketing and business development. I like don't have patience for that, right? Like, because I'm like, okay, guys, keep going. Like, no, strip it out. Let's do this, right? Like, so I love a good developmental editor, because they're really diving into your brain, like really pulling that juice out of you. And why I say that is that piece is still kind of a mystery. And that's where, in the sense of, we may do a bid and we thought it was going to only take $3,000 to do, and it ends up being literally twice as much. So I think that how I try to work it is an overall budget. Like, hey, this is what I'm going to be working on: design, editorial, and within this parameters, you serve me with a 40,000 copy manuscript. This is what I'm going to be able to do. Now, clients can all of a sudden come back and they can write a lot more, and it's like, whoa, that's a 60,000+. That means someone's got to read the whole thing, develop the whole thing with you, copy edit, all of that stuff. So those are things that I'll talk to the client about, and we often come to some kind of agreement. Why I'm called partnership publishing and not hybrid is I'm in the business to sell books, right? I'm in the business to get my book into Target, into Costco, into Barnes and Noble, or into a beautiful museum store. It just depends on the content. My goal, right, in making a great book is to really, or a great budget for a client, is to then talk to them about it, right? So say, hey, this is what happened. How do you, where do we want to give? Are we going to get, is it going to still be 2-color? Are we going to give editorial? And how much money do we think we're going to both be invested? Because ultimately, I need the book to be really great. So if we felt that we both have to dive in, I just did this for a client, and I had to literally give an extra $1,500 for editorial, but they were willing to invest more in photography, that it's a win for both of us, right? And so when we say put together a budget, I do my best. And then there's always going to be times where we have to come together, because it's a partnership in making the best product. But I think we're really reasonable. And can I just show you one thing, Christine?
Yeah.
So this is a beautiful book that we did. It came out in the fall of November of 2020. It's beautiful. Look at these illustrations, and it's fully 2-color. This is a flexi binding, lays flat, has a ribbon. This is what you got to smell this book. I got to send it to you because it's like, you got to just smell the paper.
It's called Parenting. I'm sure I need it.
Yeah. Okay, good. It's called Parenting with Sanity and Joy, actually. And it's like so great. It's just like 101 tips. You can literally be lying in bed and going, okay, which tip do I need today? Okay, 52. Talk about gift getting. Okay, yeah, that's a big one. I have 3 girls. I mean, this is like, or practice empathy. Like these 2 tips, I need both of these right now. So this book is going into Target on the Mother's Day end cap in stores. I'm so excited. But that is what, to make this book work, it took a lot of time, right? It took a lot of great development and stuff. And so there was negotiation, but ultimately we decided, like Sue Groner decided, no, Angela, it's really worth it to hire the illustrator to make an original illustration for the cover also. Like that wasn't originally in the budget, right? So it's a give and take, but it made sense because now the book is going into Target. So we made the right call with original illustrations.
It looks beautiful. It looks like something I would buy in Target and give to people for Mother's Day. So I totally get it.
Good. That's
like
point,
something
right?
I need. Anyone listening, if you're looking for a gift for me for Mother's Day, it's called Parenting with Sanity and Joy. I desperately need it. My P.O. box is on my website. Please send it my way.
Oh my God, I adore you. Absolutely. It's going on.
Because I'm looking
April.
for some joy, some sanity.
And exactly. Isn't that the best title?
It is.
Yeah, it is, right? And it says 101 simple strategies too, right there.
Mm-hmm.
It's you need 101, maybe sometimes 201, but
no, I don't have time for that many.
so just 101. I'm going to send it. There's actually areas in this book where you can, which I love about it, where you can like write little things too. The paper is this wood-free paper, and there's totally writing elements, like making yourself little lists. It's such a great mom book.
Yeah, I love it. I mean, I think that's a really great example of what you do. So thank you so much for sharing it.
Oh, you're welcome. And she's actually launching a podcast. So I might have to have you talk with Sue in terms of like coaching or whatever. She's really fun. So I know she's on the train to launch a podcast as well.
Oh, wonderful. That's so exciting. It's a lot going on. She used the podcast to sell the book.
It's one more way because we've done really well. We're already at reprint, but it's smart of her. It's when Target takes some books, you need to reprint. But it's smart of my clients to do podcasts. Actually, let's talk about that. Mm-hmm. Not a bad, when she told me she wanted to start a podcast, I was like, go for it, Sue. I mean, she's a parenting coach. She can do tons of tips. There's tons of parents out there to talk to. Everyone has a unique situation.
And there's huge room to grow in that area because parents are literally looking for those tips. They're looking to get away from screen time, and they're looking to get some information while they're multitasking. So yeah, I think that is a great
idea. That's what I say to all my authors when they're like, oh, I'm thinking about doing it. I'm like, I would love more information because maybe I'll send some authors your way because it's, it is a good way. I just thought about it. I'm like, oh yeah, that's a good way to also sell your book. But it's just a good way to set them apart and make them an authority in the space. And I guess that goes back to Christine, the why. Why are you starting a podcast, or why are you writing a book?
Yeah, exactly. So something else we talk about here is our struggles and overcoming them. And because I have listened to some other podcasts with you in them, I know that your career has kind of been an up and down road. Like before you became a founder, you went through a lot of stuff. And specifically, I want to give a shout out to the podcast I listened to. I think it's called like Hey Babe.
Oh, I love them.
They were great. Yeah. Hey Babe, beautiful podcast. You were featured on it. And also, if you guys are looking for another like a podcast that is going to make you feel good, check out Hey Babe. Also, fun to say Hey Babe. Um,
And I gotta tell you, Caitlin actually, we're working on her book, which is coming out in spring 2022. And um, she's just the most giving. As like you said, the podcast was literally so incredible. It was like the biggest treat. I felt like I want people who are looking to like as a guest, like I felt so loved. Could you tell that in the podcast when you were listening to it?
I
It
just
like
felt
made me
you so,
feel loved.
yeah, you seemed very comfortable, like very
Yeah.
just like held in a safe space. So,
Yes,
yeah.
that's what they created. It was like it was just so like, oh my God, and she is a therapist, so like that helps. Caitlin has an incredible practice, but she uses that ability within being a podcaster, and it's just a gift to be a guest on her podcast. You should you guys would probably have a blast.
I would love to
Yeah,
collaborate with her.
could I do an intro?
For sure, please do. Um,
Cool.
but what I wanted to talk about was, um, for a lot of podcasters, there are these sticking points, these things that stop them from stepping into where they want to go, from really owning it and taking that next step forward. And I'm wondering if you ever felt like this fear, this thing that was catching you, stopping you from actually owning it, being the founder of your own company, and doing it all yourself. And I mean, I know it's not all by yourself, but what did it take for you to mentally step into your expertise, your power, and then put yourself out there in what might feel like a vulnerable way?
This is an amazing question, and a whole nother podcast topic. But but the short of it is, I never thought I would be being a founder of this on my own. Like I looked and talked to some of my closest colleagues in publishing to jump the ledge with me, to be completely frank. And every single one of them said, at this moment in my life, I cannot, but you can do it alone. You are that person. We believe in you. And these are people that work at like Random House, Chronicle Books, Simon and Schuster, like really big houses. These are my colleagues, Abrams, Cameron Company, and every single one was like, "You can do this. You can do this, Angela." And there are days that I think I'm crazy, that I'm like, "What did I do?" And there are days, to be honest, that I would love a co-founder to have a glass of wine with, to cry with, to say, what's our next step? But I'm so lucky because Lauren Bensinger, who you see on my website, although she does not work for us, she's come on as an advisor. And so we're going to go get nails done outside because I'm still, it's Berkeley and we're still very, very, very like weird here. We like are in lockdown probably till 2023, who knows, but like, we do everything outside, but we're going to get nails and go on a walk. And that's what biggest advice for anybody in entrepreneurship is like, find out who your circle is. And if they all tell you who can do it alone, do it. But find that one person who, I said to her, you're not going to do it with me, because trust me, I wanted her my co-founder. If you're not going to do this with me, then will you just stick by me? And she said, absolutely. There you go.
I love it because for me, also being an entrepreneur, the thing that has saved me so many times when I start to like doubt myself is like the community of people around me, who pick me back up and they're like, Christine, of course you can. Like,
Yes.
step up,
Correct.
girl, you got this.
Correct.
So
Correct.
it's so funny. I think sometimes that we need that a little extra push. um
And,
and
and
then
didn't I, oh, sorry.
go ahead.
No, I was wondering, in that Hey Babe podcast, I think I talked about my daughter, right? I think I
Yeah.
talked about that. And that I stick with all the time. And just to give the listener some context, um, having a third baby is insane, actually, is the craziest thing. And I was almost 40 and I had to leave corporate in a way. My husband's business was doing fantastic at the time. He's actually a restaurant accountant, believe it or not. So COVID's a little different, but like it was just time. It was time for me to think about what else I was going to do other than be at a trade show very, very pregnant and working all the time and traveling and being away from my family. And so having my third baby, I decided not to just become the collective book studio, but to consult. And I was consulting, and I had the gift of consulting for Cameron and Company, and back into publishing. But I also got time to like walk in an ergo on a trail hike up in the mountain. But I also knew that just one gig or consulting was not going to bring in enough revenue or wasn't going to just fulfill me in the same way. And so when my oldest daughter says to me, who's now 13 years old, but at the time was around 9, and I'm upset, and there's a crying baby, and there's a toddler, and there's a 9-year-old in the car, and I say, go touch your dad, he makes all the money. And my oldest daughter, who saw me since she was 14 weeks old, and I was flying off to a presentation to give to Target, and I had to leave her. So, and she says to me, Mom, you could make money too. And that keeps me going. That they keep me going, my daughter. My daughter who saw me this way believes in me this way.
You're gonna make me cry. Because
Yeah.
I think that there really is something so powerful in like I didn't step into entrepreneurship until I had my son. And that was back in 2018, like literally like the day after I had him, I was brainstorming my plan. Like I was like, let's
Yes.
do this. It's happening.
Yes.
And I like that's when it happened. And it's almost this feeling of like wanting to model something for him and now for my daughter as well. And like if I can believe it in myself, they can believe it in themselves, and then I can see the wonderful amazing people they blossom into. And so yeah, there's just something so powerful about that. And god,
Well,
kids.
that is it. That's your superpower
Yeah.
of being a mother, of being a
Yeah.
woman. That is the part that is so incredible. I write this on my blog, OOO equals success. And it really was about me jumping off this entrepreneurial ledge to say, my time with my children, my out of office, is going to make me a better leader, a better communicator, an active listener. And I think what you just said, and how we're raising our kids and how they're seeing that. And I think that was what women do differently, and we will continue to do. We'll lead differently. We'll be entrepreneurial mindset differently. We will build community. So Christine, am so honored, honestly, that you chose me to be a guest, right? I gotta tell you, as you can tell, I'm very extroverted. I'm comfortable in my skin, but it is still scary to reach out to a podcaster, right? I'd love your advice, right? Like, cause it's like, oh, they could tell me no, or does this look for me? They have no idea who I am. So like, even you, I was like, that was your ask. And I was like, I liked the way you talked, and I read your profile, and I was like, looked you up, and I was like, it still is scary to go, there could be a no. She could not want me. And it, so I feel blessed. You were like, sure, Angela, I absolutely love you on. It's fun, that's just wanted you to know it takes some coaching there too,
Yeah.
to ask people to be on their podcast.
It does. That is something I work with people on because sometimes it's hard to pitch yourself and put yourself out there and like here's and people have said no to me and that's okay, or like I'm pitching on behalf of someone else because sometimes that's easier for to pitch behalf on someone else. But either way, I think when you come at it from the perspective of how will I serve this person's audience, then it's kind of a no-brainer. I saw your profile, I saw you, I was like, oh, she will absolutely, like, I actually have questions from my community I forgot to ask
Oh,
you.
okay.
Let me pull this up. Okay, quickly. Christoph, do you have a second for this question?
Oh, sure, of course. Me?
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I remember I moved my thing to 11:15. So
Okay.
yes.
Well,
Okay. Yeah.
well, yeah. Um, okay. So this is from Christoph. His podcast is called "I'm Kind of a Big Deal." It is, um, he interviews little people about their huge stories, and he is a little person. So he is asking, what materials do I need to have together before I approach a publisher?
So I think I addressed, he needs to have his why, right? He needs to
Mm-hmm.
start writing down what is the sort of structure, what's the top table of contents, what's his synopsis. You have to have that. You can't just go, hey, I've got 40 episodes. Like, okay. Like, okay, just the biggest thing. It's like so listen to it, construct it, really all of that. And honestly, if he wants, there are what I call book doctors, book coaches, lots of people to invest in to help them get there. But even with us, you're going to need something written down. That's how he's going to start. And then once he has that, then he's got to figure out, is this book, who publishes in that category? Also, I always tell people, do your research. Like we started off, the power of the small press. You might not need the big five, but do your research. Like people approach me and they send me a novel, and I'm like, we right there don't say we do novel or memoir. How many times? But there's a great company called She Writes Press that I refer to people all the time that is very, very good, has been around for almost 10 years in women doing novels. So my thing with him is find out if anybody is already publishing something that he wants to write about, and who is that publisher.
Got it. Thank you so much, Angela, for being on my show. I so appreciate it. You are absolutely wonderful, and I would love for people to look up your website. It's called thebookcollective.studio. So if you'd like more information on what it looks like for partnership publishing, go ahead.
It's we can add that. It's thecollectivebook.studio.
Did I say it backwards?
Yes.
Oh my gosh, I literally read it. I read it and it swapped in my head.
Yes, it did that. That's why I was like, I better correct her.
It is thecollectivebook.studio.
Correct.
I am nursing.
Okay, you can leave all that then in the podcast. People will be like, what happened?
And you'll learn all on that website, all about partnership publishing, how it works. And is there anything else you would like our listeners to know?
No, but other than you guys, that feel free. They can definitely find us also on social at the Collective Book Studio, and our DMs are open. As well as our you'll see there's submissions. That's a really good thing. Not just that, but there's a submissions page on our website. I think actually, even if you don't want to submit to us, use submission pages to look what we're looking for. Actually, Christine, that's good advice too. Like, look what I'm looking for, because even if I'm not the right places, the other publishers are looking for the same thing.
Well, thank you again. Yeah, make sure to check out Angela Engel, and I'll leave all of this information that we've talked about. I've got links to everything we mentioned, all the sources you brought up, and all of this information is going to be in the show notes.
Thank you so much, Christine. I loved it. It was fun.
Thank you for listening to Podcast Coaching with Christine. If you have a guest suggestion or topic idea, make sure to send me an email at podcastcoachchristine@gmail.com. And if you know someone who has launched a podcast, or if they have started a podcast, but they need a little bit more guidance when it comes to growing their show, please let them know about our show. Thanks for listening. Now let's change the world with our stories.